What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of Goat Talk with Marcus, powered by Poddex and fueled by Goat Fuel. Once again, joining me on the show, my good man Sal Vassallo of Sports in the Big Apple. What's up, Sal? How you doing today?
Uh, Pretty good. Coming off, a great draft for my Jets yesterday. Looking forward to Timberwolves Grizzlies tonight. That's been really the series for me. Um, as like I don't know, a lot of these like early series are kind of like I feel like are pretty one sided. Obviously, not the one that is going on tonight, Memphis and Minnesota, but some of these other ones. I mean, like Nets Celtics, the games were close, but the Celtics swept. This one, the Bucks and the Bulls. I mean, after game two, it was three straight blowouts.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was interesting. That Warriors Nuggets. I mean, it's always fun to watch the Warriors, but I mean that
Yeah.
series wasn't. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was okay, but other than that, great.
I wish I could say the same. I'm still recovering from the Packers draft. It's all good though. We'll we'll get there. We'll roll with the punches. Um, let's talk about the Bucks and the Bulls. Bucks got the job done in five. They are, however, going into Boston in this next series without Khris Middleton, who is obviously the second best player on the roster. Uh, we can't talk about the Bucks and the Bulls without talking about Khris Middleton. What does Khris Middleton's absence mean for the Bucks moving into this series against the Celtics?
Yeah, I think that the Celtics have a lot more quality, like size defensively. That and really the reason that the Bucks kind of I think got away with it a little bit. I mean, the Bucks are a talented roster, top to bottom. I mean, Grayson Allen stepped up and had a few good games, but also the Bucks don't really have the. I mean, the Bulls, excuse me, don't really have the size to combat Giannis. So I thought in that way, like there was no the Bucks really couldn't slow him down. I think the Celtics absolutely, they play physical basketball. They saw it all series against Kevin Durant and the Nets. And so I think that the Celtics are a bigger team. They're a more physical team than the Bulls. So that's where I think the Bucks will miss Khris Middleton being able to space the floor and taking pressure off Giannis.
I've been saying since the injury happened that this is going to be a major loss because we've seen the formula and we've seen outcomes when it's just Giannis by himself without that second guy to go to in big moments. Defenses dare Giannis or let Giannis do what he does, and they dare other guys around him to beat them. I would like to think that that's going to be the strategy, and that's going to be the thought process for the Celtics moving forward. Um, Especially considering that they're the home team, especially considering that they'll have home court advantage. They'll have the game seven and Boston. If it gets there, Boston's a really tough spot to play in the playoffs. This is a really good team defensively, a really solid team offensively. The Bucks are just outmatched as far as depth. Like you're not. I don't think we're going to see Grayson Allen have 2 games of 20 plus points against this Boston Celtics defense. Like that, I don't see that happening. So that's going to be an issue. I don't really think that Bobby Portis and or Brook Lopez will be able to kind of get into them as well. Um, there are options, but there aren't consistent options around Giannis on the bench. And that's where I think that the loss of Khris Middleton is going to be hurtful. Also, because Drew Holiday as well. I mean, you look at what he did in this series. Um, Drew Holiday's there defensively and he's there to facilitate. It's not that he can't score, but he's gonna have to step up offensively as well to again try to help take some of that load off of Giannis. Giannis averaged, if we're just rounding here, he averaged 29, 13, and 6 with just under 2 blocks, shot 57% from the field, 68% from the line. What more can you expect from Giannis Antetokounmpo? Really, that's pretty much on par for him. Um, you look at Drew Holiday in 36 minutes per game, he averaged 16, 7, and 5, shot 41% from the field, 35% from three, 60% from the line. That is not going to be a winning recipe from Drew Holiday if you're talking about trying to get past a stout Boston Celtics defense. So That's where I'm focused on, is really Jrue Holiday and his production, as far as what he can bring to the table, as far as can he elevate his play, because he's going to have to average at least 20 to 22 points a game in this series for the Bucks to be able to, you know, stay afloat in this series. Are they going to win their 3 home games? I think so. It would be in their best interest to try to steal a game in Boston as well, to try to force Boston to steal a game in Milwaukee. I know that Giannis is a champion. I know he's the reigning Finals MVP. He's the reigning Finals champion. I know that he's a 2-time MVP and a Defensive Player of the Year, and one of the best players in the world. And depending on who you ask, the best player in the world. Taking nothing away from him, though, it is a tall task, and I don't want to minimize Giannis or take away from him, but I also can't ignore what greatness we saw defensively from Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, the Defensive Player of the Year, and Robert Williams when he returned to the lineup, and even other guys like Pritchard and Daniel Tice and Al Horford, who kind of stepped up in big moments as well. So it's going to be tough. This is not going to be an easy series for the Bucks by any stretch of the imagination. So that brings me to the next question, because I just mentioned Jrue Holiday. Who do you think can be that guy, or who do you think can be those guys that can kind of step up and fill that void? Because Khris Middleton can give you 20 to 25 points a night. He's gonna shoot well. He's gonna be efficient, but most importantly, he's gonna be your closer. And I don't think that there's anybody on the Bucks that you can really trust, not named Giannis or Khris Middleton, with the ball in their hands at the end of the game. Who do you think the Bucks are gonna look to be one of those guys in those clutch moments, hopefully to take some of that load off Giannis?
Yeah, I mean, you just said it. I think Jrue Holiday is definitely one of them. I think obviously he's going to have to play really well. I mean, other than that, I mean, there's not a lot of guys on the roster that you look to. Do you look for some offense maybe from Brook Lopez? I mean, when Brook Lopez first came up with the Nets, he was one of the biggest offensive forces in the game, and injuries have kind of bitten him a little bit, but Brook Lopez for the most part has had a good season, I think, when he's been on the floor. So I think the Bucks are going to need some consistency from him, and I think it would fare them well because of the size, I think, of the Celtics, like I just mentioned, that the Bucks have to try to match that size somewhere, and I think Brook Lopez is definitely going to have to be a guy that steps up. Obviously, Grayson Allen is another guy, you hope that he can keep it going. Like you said, I don't know if he could against this Boston Celtics defense, especially if Marcus Smart has anything to do with that. I think Grayson Allen's gonna have a lot of trouble, but there's really not a lot of guys that you could look to here. And you better hope that Middleton is back by game 3, because
He's already expected to miss the entire series. And MCL's tough. That's definitely a tough injury to come back from, especially because it's sprained. One wrong thing, you're talking going from a sprained MCL to a torn MCL, or maybe even a potentially sprained or torn ACL, PCL, UCL. That gets really, really tough when you're talking about the knees. I don't know. It's going to be difficult. Jrue Holiday is going to have to be that guy. He's definitely going to have to step up offensively. We know he can be clutch defensively, but offensively, 16.4 points per game in a playoff series against these Boston Celtics is not going to cut it.
I mean, yeah, you look up and down the Bucks lineup, there's just not a lot really there in terms of depth. And, I know that they're the defending champs for a reason, but a big reason for that is obviously Khris Middleton. You look up and down now, you got Brook Lopez, who I just mentioned, Jrue Holiday, Patrick Connaughton, maybe, Grayson Allen. I mean, those 4 guys are really, I think, where the depth scoring comes from outside of Giannis, at least on a consistent level. I mean, are you going to expect, Wesley Matthews to carry the offensive load? No. Bobby Portis can score some points, but is he going to really be like the guy? I don't think so. He'll score, and he'll make his good defensive plays, but I think it's going to have to be Lopez and Holiday really carrying the load here with Giannis.
It'll be an interesting thing to see. Let's talk about the Bulls for a second, because we've heard DeMar DeRozan has said that he is going to be actively looking to recruit guys to Chicago. Zach LaVine is open to signing a max extension if it's offered. Should Zach LaVine sign that max extension, or should he go elsewhere? Um, or better yet, or vice versa, should Chicago offer the max extension to Zach LaVine? Either way, what as far as the max is concerned for Zach LaVine, what's does that? Where's your stance on that?
Yeah, I think they should. And part of it for Zach LaVine is you're going to have to sit down, and Zach LaVine, I think, will get money where, I think somebody will pay him. If not the Bulls, somebody will. So I think you got to sit down with the front office and say, hey, what's the plan here? And you got to hope part of that plan is to get some, quality big men, especially defensively. You need some defensive intensity there. I mean, you have the thing about the Bulls is it was a team that was very banged up. Patrick Williams was injured most of the season. Obviously, the loss of Lonzo Ball really hurt the defense at the point guard spot. Vucevic really is a good offensive player, although his shooting percentage dropped down to like 31.4% this year. And for a guy that's supposed to be all offensive based, I mean, that's really just not going to cut it. So, I mean, and that's kind of why the Bucks were able to, or at least Giannis was able to do as much damage as he was. As good of a player as he was, I mean, the biggest off threat they had as far as size-wise was Vucevic, who's not a great defensive player, great offensive player when he's going right. But it's a guy that did not have a great year offensively, and a guy who really is not a great defensive player. So some rim protection, I think, should be in order, I think, for the Bulls. Two names that come to mind are JaVale McGee or just watching him all year, Mitchell Robinson from the Knicks. Because it doesn't sound like Mitch Robinson and the Knicks are going to come to an extension agreement or anything. So, and you've heard the trade rumors with Mitchell Robinson. I wonder if the Bulls were in on it.
It's possible, and I wouldn't be all that surprised if they were.
No, and I think you need some size here. I agree with DeMar DeRozan because you have some good pieces there. You have DeRozan, Levine leading the way, Caruso and Lonzo Ball leading the defense. If you get some size in there, I really do think the Bulls can be really, really good. Well, they were really good this year, but I just meant like in terms of now moving into that next level, that next tier to compete with teams like the Bucks. I think it all comes down to the big man. Lock up your star, take care of your star player, because I think Levine is going. I think Levine's only going to get better from here out.
Well, I mean, look at Levine this season. Just if we're not talking about the playoffs, he averaged 24, 5, and 5 this season. Shot 48 from the field, 39 from 3, 85 from the field from the free throw line. Effective field goal percentage was at 55%. In the playoffs, and he did miss 15 games this season. That is something worth noting. In the playoffs, in about 38 minutes played per game, he averaged 19, 5, and 5, shot 43, 38, and 93. So he played okay. I'm not going to say that the Bulls shouldn't sign or shouldn't look to extend Zach LaVine, obviously, because without him, because you're going to need that guy offensively to take off that load from DeMar DeRozan, who I think is, based on what we've seen this season, he's clearly the best player on this team. And that's no shot at Zach LaVine, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because Zach LaVine is clearly the second guy on this team. It's tough for the Bulls though, because the Bulls, it's interesting. Like, okay, if Lonzo Ball doesn't miss all that time due to injury, do they slot in as, what are they, the 6th seed? Do they slot in as the 6th seed this season? Probably not. But does that make all of that much of a difference as far as making it out of the first round? I don't think so. In my personal opinion, the weak link on this basketball team is Nicola Vucevic. I've been very critical of Vucevic all season because he hasn't been consistent, especially in big moments offensively and defensively. He has come up short more often than not in big moments for the Chicago Bulls. That's not good when you have guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo and you have guys like Joel Embiid, even a guy like a Clint Capella. Even you looking what they've got in Cleveland, when they have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. Obviously, the Nets are going to be looking to trying to get better at the big man position. You have Bam Adebayo out there in Miami, so there are a lot of decent big men, a lot of solid above average to great big men in the Eastern Conference. And I don't know if Nikola Vucevic will be able to hold his own. I mean, we already saw that he couldn't really hold his own against Giannis, which why would we expect him to? Why would we expect him to? If this was a series against the 76ers, I'd expect the same thing. If this was a series against the Heat, I'd expect the same thing. Maybe when you get to your Clint Capellas and your Evan Mobleys and your Drummonds and guys like that, maybe things get a little bit different. But Nikola Vucevic has struggled in his matchups against the other solid big men in the Eastern Conference. That is definitely something to look at. But I think defense has to be the main focus. I think offensively, these guys are solid. At one point, the Bulls were ranked top 5 in offense and defense in the season. But this is the other thing too about the Bulls and why it's kind of hard to project moving forward where they'll be ranking is because up until their game, what was that? Their game 2 victory against Milwaukee, where DeMar DeRozan dropped 41 points and they won by 4 points. That was they hadn't won a game against the elite teams in the NBA. Like, they hadn't beaten the Bucks in the regular season series. They didn't beat the 76ers in the regular season. They looked disgusting against the Miami Heat during the regular season. They struggled against the Warriors. They struggled against the Suns and the Grizzlies. All the top teams in the NBA that have moved on to the second round, they struggled against and went winless against those basketball teams in the regular season. They beat the teams they were supposed to beat, and that's good. But they posted a winless record against the good teams, the great teams, the playoff teams this season. So that's something that you have to look at as well. You can say that maybe that points to defense. Again, you could say that has maybe something to do with Lonzo Ball missing games due to injury, most of the season due to injury, and obviously Zach LaVine missing 15 games due to injury as well. But it's hard to peg. It's hard really to assess where the Bulls can potentially be. Do they make the playoffs again next year? Absolutely. I think it'd be crazy not to expect them to. Like, the Celtics will still be there, and the Bucks obviously will still be here, and so will the Heat, right? But then once you get past those 3 teams, you've got to throw the 76ers in there as well. Like, they're, I think, still slated as the 5th. I think you can say they're solidly still the 5th best team in the Eastern Conference, right there with the Raptors and the Hawks if they get better. But then there's other teams like the Cavs who are on the come up, and it gets a little dicey. So it'll be interesting to see what the Bulls do. Focusing back on the Bucks, though, because we have to talk about now they've got the Boston Celtics. And we touched on this earlier, and I just want to wrap it up here and just talk about it one more time. If the Bucks cannot get past the Celtics in this second round matchup, or let's go the other way and say they do get past the Bucks, or the Bucks do get past the Celtics in the second round. And actually, I think that would be the better question. Let's say the Bucks get past the Celtics. Is Khris Middleton then, do you think, depending on how things go with his health and how things go with this sprained MCL, do you think the Bucks look and they kind of ease him into the conference finals should they get there? Or let's say the Bucks are now struggling in this series and they're down 3-1 at some point, or they're down 2-1 at some point. Do you think that they'll try to get Khris Middleton back in this lineup as soon as possible to try to move on to the second round? Do you think they're just going to try to muscle along without him? Because, again, this is an MCL. We saw Devin Booker play in Game 6 in that closeout game against the Suns. He didn't really look like himself. Not that he was limping around, but didn't really look like himself. And we've seen in NBA history what can happen sometimes when you rush a player back from an injury, especially in the legs with a sport like basketball. Do you see Khris Middleton getting rushed back? Let's say if Boston jumps out to a 2-0 lead heading into Milwaukee for Game 3.
I can, but I think you asked me that question. You asked that question, and I think back to last year with James Harden and the Nets, and I remember a play where James Harden's dribbling the ball up. He's dribbling the ball up like he normally does, and then on a play where he would normally drive to the basket, he stopped and looked to pass, and it showed me like, okay, his leg is still really bothering him. He doesn't have the explosiveness. And it's how effective can Khris Middleton be if his knee is not allowing him to be explosive. To the point, it was to the point where Harden was. I don't want to see was a liability because obviously James Harden, like you're still going to give him the attention that he deserves, but
Right. Right.
and you also mentioned it's a thing is it's a ligament issue. So if
Yeah.
he comes out and he doesn't play, he doesn't look like himself, and he hurts himself again. He really gets hurt. Then that falls on management. Then somebody is probably getting fired for getting this guy injured. So it's interesting because Khris Middleton had said he'd only expected to miss 2 weeks, but with a ligament, you kind of just got to take it day by day. You can say he's a game time decision, and maybe try to, but you'd have to really limit. Like I think that they would really limit his minutes towards the end of the game. Like obviously, as you mentioned, he's a closer, but you'd really have to see him get some close to in-game action against teammates before you make that decision, because you don't want him to be out there and be not only a liability, but you don't want him to hurt himself.
Right.
And it's because the ligament bothers me is all it is.
I mean that is the game we play sometimes when we're talking about star players and quality players on championship rosters when they get hurt. Right. With Devin Booker, it's a little bit different. That's a muscle. And with muscles, the only thing you can do is just rest it and make sure they don't get cold. Ligaments are much different, much dangerous. And like I said, you've got 4 major ligaments that hold your knee together: MCL, ACL, PCL, UCL. It can start off as a sprained MCL and then turn into something crazy where you're messing up all 4 of those major ligaments, and now you're losing Khris Middleton for more than just a second round series in the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see what they do. It's a tough one. I mean, because this is a really good Boston team. Like, this is a team in Boston that if they can make it past the Milwaukee Bucks, Boston's in the finals, in my opinion. If they can get past the Bucks, they're in the finals, because there's not a team, whether it's the Sixers or whether it's the Sixers or the Heat, in my opinion, that has enough firepower based on what we've seen in these playoffs that would make me think that Boston wouldn't be able to contain their opponents. Now, I would love to see a Celtics Heat finals, Eastern Conference finals, because that would be a defensive showcase, and I'd love that. I'd also be interested in seeing there are a lot of different ways you can go, and I think Boston's doing really good. We don't have to obviously project because they've still got the series to play, but the Khris Middleton injury is definitely an interesting one. I think it's obviously the biggest wild card in all of this, because if it really is just 2 weeks and Khris Middleton can come back sooner rather than later, obviously that's what you want to see. If you're the Milwaukee Bucks, and if you're a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks, and if you're Giannis Antetokounmpo, and if you're the coaching staff, that's what you want to see. So very interesting to see what they'll do with Khris Middleton, and how that'll play out in the long run. Before we go, please let everybody know where to find you and what's up next for you.
Yes, you can find me on Spotify, Google Podcast, Libsyn, and iHeartRadio at Sports in the Big Apple. You can also find me on Instagram at Sports in the Big Apple. I'm going to talk Jets and Giants draft and just what I think of the draft overall. Obviously for the Jets, I thought it was for the Jets and the Giants, it was a slam dunk. For the Giants, it was more of great players fell into their lap. And I think they got 2 great value players. Evan Neal, obviously, probably the best offensive lineman in the draft. And obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau, despite all the rumors about his football ethic, I still think I really do think Kayvon Thibodeau is going to light it up. I think the Jets wanted Sauce Gardner, so they went and got him. I don't really think it had anything to do with Kayvon's worth ethic. I just think that the Jets wanted Sauce Gardner more. But yeah, you can find me. I'm going to be doing my draft show coming up pretty soon, so just looking forward to that. Looking forward to this Memphis-Minnesota game, with Minnesota trying to keep their season alive. So looking forward to it.
Well, thank you for coming on the show as always. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. If you haven't already, please check out all the previous series recaps we've done with Peyton Doyle and Justin Marvel and Blaine Spencer and Spencer Fielding as well. By the time you hear this, the Grizzlies Timberwolves series will be over, and we'll know what goes on from there. And then that series recap will be available for you on the day after today, which you'll be listening to this on Monday. So thank you guys for watching, listening. Please follow on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at GTP Marcus, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Go Talk with Marcus. Leave a like, subscribe. Please subscribe so you can get to 100 followers by the end of May, or subscribe by the end of May. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new episodes. Sal will be back on the show twice more in the coming weeks. Once to talk about the Jets as a part of our 32 episode NFL series here on Go Talk with Marcus. He and another special guest who will be coming on the show for the very first time. We'll be talking about the Jets draft and just how great it was, their offseason, and looking forward to their regular season as well. And then also Wrestlemania Backlash on the horizon. It'll be its first pay-per-view in the new calendar year of WWE. Roman Reigns is the undisputed WWE Universal Champion. But he's out on the card, whatever. The Usos and RK Bro are looking to unify the tag team championships. We've got Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair in an I Quit match for the WWE SmackDown Women's Championship. Bianca Belair is the new Raw Women's Champion. She may or may not still be having her match against Sonya Deville. A lot of interesting things going on in WWE, so be on the lookout for that as well. So please, you guys, make sure you guys are following, liking, subscribing, and turning on the notifications so you don't miss any new episodes, because the next couple of months are going to be very, very, very busy for Go Talk with Marcus, and I don't want you to miss any of the new content. So for Sal Vassallo of Sports in the Big Apple, this is Marcus of Go Talk with Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, you guys enjoy the rest of it.